Right. How do you describe Freeports in one word? In my opinion, abomination. The gentleman there brought up there, what do? We fight. We have to fight. Because this is the biggest attack on Scotland that you could ever possibly imagine. We are not going to benefit a single penny from it. At all. Now, there was a list of apologies that couldn't make the meeting tonight. I'm going to read the list that are partners, that are actually part of Freeport. And many of these are the reasoning for why they're not here. Because they don't want to be here. They don't want to be answering the questions that we've got. Right, I'll start with this and then I'll go to the other things. But you've got Arrowgive, Bryden Baker, Cala Chemical. And this page will answer a few questions. Catapult, City Deal Region, Edinburgh, South East Scotland, Edinburgh Airport, Edinburgh Council, Edinburgh College, the University of Edinburgh, ENBW BP, Falkirk Council, Fife Council, Fife Chambers of Commerce, Fife College, Forth Valley, Net Zero, Forth Valley College, Forth Valley and Forth Ports, and a certain company that's in Grangemouth. Invest Fife, NMIS, Ocean Engineering, Paramall, Strathclyde, Glasgow, University of, the Scotland 5G Centre, Scarborough Muir and Queensferry 1. Now, that is why nobody from the councillors or local MPs want to come here, because they're scared to death of the answers and the questions that they're going to have to answer. Now, within these Freeports, now there was a question asked, well it was kind of prompted to the meeting in Larbert last week, why is there Freeports in the east of Scotland and there's none in the west? Well, it's very simple. If you look at the Forth, for example, you can start as far up as Methil docks, then you come down to Burnt Island. You've even got the wee docks at Inverkeithing that collect the scrap. Then you go round the corner, you're into Rosyth Port, Rosyth Naval Dockyard. Then you go up the Forth, you've got Crombie Point. You've then got Grangemouth Refinery, Grangemouth Port, back down a wee bit. Then you go to Edinburgh, Edinburgh Airport, Turnhouse, Portleith, and that's pretty much all the industrial bits that are anything of worth. Now you go up to Inverness. Now what's happening in Inverness? The renewables. They're building the hydrogen plant up there. That is part of the Freeports up there. This is possibly the biggest land grab asset strip that Westminster has done to Scotland under the guise of a partnership with the SNP government. Now, that to me is beyond the pale. As a sovereign Scot, my territory has been taken from underneath my feet without my wishes. Now, gentlemen probably asked the questions, why don't we know about it? I was at a march in Larbert and Falkirk with under one banner. I was asked to hand out leaflets after that. I managed to hand out 4 leaflets. And it wasn't for the one to try, and I can tell you. But the 4 people that I came across knew nothing about Freeports. Nothing at all. And when you explain to them what they are, you can actually see in their faces how shocked and disgusted they were. Now, what can we do about it? These meetings, for example, are a great way of getting information out. But we have to stand together, as what they did with the poll tax. This is worse than poll tax. Because what you're going to find here, workers' rights, anybody that works in these Freeports, their workers' rights are completely and utterly annihilated. You'll probably find that you have workers, you have friends here that work in these areas, will be replaced by people that are going to come in. Maybe work a little bit cheaper, they don't have to worry about the same rights, etc, etc, etc. The environment. Now, that certain gentleman that's a director of that place in Grangemouth, the certain company that threatened to take the Scottish Government to court for the fracking ban, is also on the board of Freeports. Now, environmentally, right, do you honestly think for 1 minute, if there's a couple of bob to be made, if he can start fracking, he is going to start fracking? Because what's in that border isn't Scotland. The Scottish Government have no control, overright control of what's in those Freeports, because Westminster have got their claws into it, and they are just a partner that, as a sovereign Scot will say again, is beyond the pale in my opinion. Now, 2013, 2014, we'll remember that. We were all told that if you vote yes, there'll be a hard border between Scotland and England. Do you know that these Freeports were going to have hard borders in Scotland? Because everything inside these Freeports and they control themselves. You could almost imagine them like a city of London. You've got London and you've got the city of London. They've got completely different laws. So you've got to, the government have got to try and trust that these companies are going to play by the rules. No, they're not. There's going to be money, drugs, everything you can imagine flowing into these things, and there's no control. Criminals being able to escape to them because they're out of the control. Now, how you want to look at that, how's it going to benefit you? It's not. If you've got a business inside the place, you're laughing. If you've got the same business outside, you're pretty much stuck. Now, if that doesn't bother people, I don't know what does. If you've got a nice wee house that you've worked hard for all your days, with a nice field at the back, and then you see this drilling rig coming and they start fracking, that £350,000 house, you would not be able to give it away. And that's what people need to understand, that they will not stand by and say, well, you know what, I feel sorry for you, it's a nice house. They are going to come in hammer and tongs and we need to start fighting. The land grab and asset strip, I've already said that. Now, what we're going to find ourselves in a situation that really saddens me the most. The Freeports happen tomorrow and we become independent next week. Do you know, we will then find ourselves in a position where we're going to have to fight for our own territory back. Just like what we saw with the MPs trotting for Westminster to Brexit, arguing over bits and pieces. That'll come back and bite us hard on the backside if we do not stand together and do something about this. You have to be sensible, right? But we have to stand up. You know, poll tax came to Scotland. I was a young teenager when that came about. But I witnessed what happened when it went down south. And it was the end of Thatcher. And that's what we have to do with Freeports. Because this is a big attack on this area. And if you actually look at the map, it's not just the estuary. It takes a fair chunk of Fife. It takes a fair chunk of Edinburgh. And a fair chunk of Grangemouth. And if you think of all the mines that are all around about this area that are just sitting ready to get tapped into by a fracking thing, then you can understand the amount of devastation that we're around about here. Now, the information that you can find readily online is about the Freeports down south. And I'm going to mention Teesside. Now, Teesside, there was a programme on about swimming in sewage. And there was one bit regarding the deep sea dredging to make the deeper for the bigger boats to come in so they could make more money. Now, the stuff that they picked up for the seabed, they dumped out in the ocean. And it was killing seals, it was killing fish, and crab life. That's fact. Now, anybody knows Fife. You've got Marconi's, they were technically dumping in the 1940s, the bomber sites. Now you've got the Rosyth Naval Dockyard that's been there for goodness knows how long. If they start deepening the oceans, you've got the wee port at Inverkeithing that collects the scrap. Now if he wants to make a couple of more quid, he's wanting that so he can get bigger boats in. Then you've got the same at Burnt Island. The thing with Teesside was that they linked back chemicals back to the industrial age. Things that had been locked in the seabed for 100 years. I don't know what will be round about there, but there's things in Crammond, there's wee signs there that tell you already not to pick up shellfish. Now, Brayfoot, Mossmorn, that is another plant that's within the Freeports. Now, if you look at the maps that are out about there, I think then you'll understand the level of, I'm going to use the word corruption, because that is what it is. I've not been asked if they want my permission for it. I was talking to a gentleman that was at the SNP AGM, and how it was portrayed to him was it was a good thing for Scotland. It's not. It's not a good thing for Scotland, and that's what we need to start thinking about and how we're going to fight things. And the gentleman there says, how do we do it? Well, do you want to do it? Do you want to fight for your own right? You know, I don't know your personal circumstances. You might have a really nice house with a nice field out the back.
I do, aye.
Right, well, and you've got a drilling rig back there, that nice house in...
No, I haven't at the moment.
No, but if it was, then you would think to yourself at a day like this, I wish I never done something.
Well, that's how I came to the meeting tonight, funnily enough.
So, my starting point for my contribution to this discussion tonight is to cast your minds back to the hope and aspirations of 2014. That new type of Scotland that we envisaged as part of the independence movement. And nowhere in that was the acceptance of the continued robbery of Scotland's vast natural wealth. Now, I'm from the left wing of politics, without any doubt. That's definitely where my politics rests. However, there is some advantage to drawing in inward investment and job creation. When you say Freeports and people hang shiny baubles out to suggest that there's going to be massive inward investment and lots of jobs, a lot of people are seduced by that, and the organisations that John's just listed, many of them are attracted by the promise of some form of advancement. The colleges will be thinking, we can design courses to equip young people to fulfil the jobs that these big businesses are going to bring into the Fife Estuary. We'll be able to be part of the green energy revolution. And that is exactly how it's being sold. And there was a debate today in Westminster Hall that was about the important role of ports to the UK and the green revolution as we move forward. But what they don't tell you is that the advent of free ports removes all regulation. It hands the governance of the designated area, which is not just a wee boundary around the port itself. And in the situation in the Fourth Estuary, it comes significantly inland. So anything within the curtilage of that boundary is operated under the governance of a private company. And there is no jurisdiction or inreach from the national government or the UK government or Fife Council to stipulate what regulations that private company either institutes and observes. It's all done on trust, or, more importantly, how they can scrutinise and hold them to account. And Teesside is an excellent example of where it has been impenetrable to get a reasonable response from the operating organisation of that free port when there have been serious concerns raised about it. And so I want to sort of take a side step across to political ideology and think a little bit about what neoconservatism is. Now, if you know what neoconservatism is, I apologise for my swift and probably rather sparse view of it, but it's conservatism, it's capitalism, it is market forces, it is driven, in my view, by greed, avarice, sharp knees and sharp elbows, and it's not about the survival of the fittest. Not at all. It's the people who can gain, who can act in corrupt ways, who can manipulate systems, who take advantage, and they don't care about the consequences for the population that suffer. That is what neoconservatism is to me, and certainly if I look back at the Chicago School of Economics, and this is an economics school that rose in the 60s and had their test bed in South America, where they created disruption in the political systems of countries so that they could go in and get access to the resources, the natural wealth of that country, privatise it, and then sell those resources off for a profit to operators who had no genuine interest in the welfare of the people of those countries. Chile was probably the first example of where that happened, where Augusto Pinochet was installed as a dictator, and the only failure of the neoconservative plan then was that he wouldn't let go of the copper mines, and that is still the wealth of the Chilean people. So that is the ideology that dresses up this quite fluffy sounding green free port. Sounds good, sounds like it's free. The only freedom that exists in a free port is the freedom of the marketeers and the corporate interests that control that entity. That is the only freedom that we're talking about. The freedom to dilute workers' rights, the freedom to dilute environmental standards, the freedom to squirrel away contraband, to allow smuggling or to look the other way when smuggling operations come into being. And there are some serious questions about, does the boundary stop where the boundary stops? Because an operator who has a business or part of their business within the curtilage of that free port can operate a warehouse operation, which is a pretty broad term, out with that, and it can still be considered to be part of the free port. Now, how you are able to inspect and monitor the operations of those businesses within the laws of the land is quite another thing. I mean, I just don't know how that's going to happen. So, I mean, in terms of the broad brush of what a Freeport is, that's kind of what it is. It's a vehicle, a tax haven, for lack of another word, with a secret jurisdiction that the people that live within and without it cannot penetrate to understand what the laws and practices within that boundary are. So, like many of the organisations that John referred to, I find myself in the inevitable position of being completely opposed to neoliberal ideology, but also having to think about the interests of my constituents and the possibility for employment and training and economic development in the constituency, and it extends well into my constituency down through Burnt Island and beyond. And so part of me has to engage with this process because I still have to try and get the best deal out of it, and I have to understand exactly what they're up to, because I have a responsibility to raise the alarm if I think something very seriously wrong is happening. But I also have to do it in a way that doesn't provide a disbenefit to my constituents because I scare investment away. So it's quite a difficult balancing act. But the fundamental challenge is that it is grounded in an ideology of neoconservatism. Now, today's debate, Douglas spoke in it, and he acknowledged some of the very real concerns that we've got collectively, I think, here tonight about the economic and other impacts of a dysregulated area could have on the local population. But it's almost as if there is a complete acquiescence to the idea. And it goes back to this promise of benefit, this nebulous idea that it's all going to be good, guys, don't worry about it. You know, those nutters meeting in Dunfermline bowling club tonight, they've got it all wrong, it's all going to be great. Well, I hope it is great, but I have very real concerns that it's not going to be great. And certainly, in terms of how we stand up to it, which is our fundamental question, that won't be achieved by arcane arguments about ancient laws. It can only be achieved by a united political force that wins a democratic argument. It doesn't matter how, upset I get that we didn't achieve success in 2014. We didn't. Democratically, we didn't win it. We can put all the theories about whether the vote was stolen or whatever to one side. We didn't demonstrate that we won that vote. So we have to put that to one side, but we also have to think about, well, how do we demonstrate our democratic support for that as an idea, for example, for independence, or in our opposition for Freeports. And, when I was thinking about Freeports, I was trying to think of an analogy that explains what it's like in a very simple terms. But if you go back to the days of the squire or the laird, and they were, the kings of all the survey, they were in charge of the people, they were in charge of the cottages and where the people lived, and what they said went, and you couldn't, quite often politically, people who lived on the land of a lord or a senior member of the aristocracy, they would be told that they had to vote for them. And people would be returned unopposed because that was the way that things were done. And a Freeport is a bit like the return of the squire, because it is the squire, it is that private company who will say what goes. They will make up the rules. They will evaluate any infraction. They will be in charge of everything that goes on in there. And that is, I think, a message that most people understand, that we are returning to serfdom, to the power of landowner. It may not be what it's called, but in its effect, that is exactly what it will deliver or could deliver. So there's a real need to galvanise political muscle against not just Freeports, but against a lot of the really inhumane policies that are being thrust upon the people. And the only way you do that is to support a political party and win a democratic mandate. And, at the moment, to say that Scottish politics is turbulent or in flux is the understatement of the century. And, you track it back to 2007 when Alex Salmond won the first minority government for the SNP, the majority in 2011, the independence referendum. We are still suffering from the turbulence of that seismic change. And whether we like it or not, the government that got in 2015 have failed to deliver on many of the commitments that we elected them to deliver on. And in terms of the reassuring noises that are coming out around Freeports, I'll close with this one example. We were told that the sale of Scotland was an amazing achievement for the people of Scotland. We had made a massive killing on Scotland, great income for the Scottish government on the back of Scotland. Scotland, at the time, before the massive inflation that we've seen recently in energy costs, Scotland was valued at £350 billion over the 25-year lifetime of its licence. The Scottish Government were paid under £700 million for that. The annual income from that will be between £60 and £90 million if the circumstances are right. That income for the licence annually at that time was £15 billion a year. And Scotland is supposed to accept pennies. That was not a success. It was an absolute disgrace. Now, I will not be silent about these types of issues, and I will use every opportunity I have between now and a general election to raise these concerns. But we need to elect people who are actually going to fight for the people of Scotland, not acquiesce to neoconservative policies, whether they're pushed by the Tories in Westminster or some corporate agenda from out with the UK. Because at the moment, the corruption that we experienced during COVID, with vast sums of money being handed out willy-nilly to well-connected politicians or well-connected people with links to politicians, that will look like child's play. Our resources are being stolen out from under us, whether it's wind, wave, oil and gas. Scotland is receiving no benefit. We get no supply chain jobs, no manufacturing jobs, no service industry jobs. That is the reality. And the only way to change all of this is to elect people who are unafraid to give voice to the concerns that you have, because we can argue the toss day and night about arcane laws. But unless you've got a democratic mandate, the world out there doesn't give monkeys. Not at all. Because you have to make that change, to affect that change, to have real politic change, you have to win a democratic mandate. And that is the only way we can resist these changes. So with that, I'll close and I'll take any questions.